The cowboy refused every woman in town, until she asked, "You want a wife, or another winter alone?" He had refused them all. The widows with hopeful eyes and careful smiles, the young women whose mothers sent them to church early just so they could walk beside him afterward, the bold ones who laughed too loudly at the saloon and the quiet ones who left pies on his porch without knocking. He refused them with a nod, with silence, with the same distant politeness that had built a wall around his life thicker than any log cabin could ever be. Folks in Dry Creek said Eli Boone didn't hate women, he just didn't believe in warmth anymore. Not the kind that came from another human being. Winters out here taught a man things, and Eli had learned that cold was honest. Cold didn't promise and then disappear. Cold didn't leave you holding a grave marker in one hand and a newborn in the other. Cold stayed. And Eli Boone trusted things that stayed. The ranch sat 2 miles past the last fence line, where the road thinned into dirt and the wind never seemed to stop talking. His house was sturdy, built by his own hands after the fire took the first one. It had thick walls, a heavy door, and a silence inside that felt safer than conversation. Every morning before sunrise, Eli was up, boots on, coffee black and bitter, moving through chores like a man who had learned to survive without asking anything from the world. He fed the horses, checked the cattle, repaired whatever the wind or snow had broken overnight. In town, people said he worked too hard. Eli thought they didn't work hard enough. They also said he was lonely. That part, he never answered. The first winter after Clara died, he nearly froze because he refused help. The second winter, he nearly starved because grief had stolen his appetite. By the third, he had learned how to endure without feeling. And by the fifth, endurance had become a habit. Women came and went from Dry Creek, some married, some buried, some just passing through. Eli Boone stayed. Alone. Always alone. And when winter came early that year, harsher than anyone remembered, the town whispered more than usual. They whispered that no man could face another winter like that alone. They whispered that even the strongest froze eventually. That was when she arrived. No one noticed her at first. Dry Creek wasn't the kind of place that welcomed strangers easily, and winter had made everyone cautious. She came in on the morning stagecoach, wrapped in a coat too thin for the cold, boots dusted with travel, eyes alert but tired. She didn't ask many questions. She didn't smile too much. She paid for a room above the general store and thanked the owner like gratitude was something she had learned not to waste. Her name was Maeve Carter. And she had the kind of presence that didn't beg to be seen, it waited. Eli saw her for the first time at the feed store. She was studying grain prices with the seriousness of someone who counted every coin. He noticed her because she didn't look away when he glanced at her, didn't flutter or pretend interest in something else. She met his gaze like she was measuring the weight of a man, not his reputation. Then she looked back down at the list, businesslike, calm. That should have been the end of it. Eli Boone didn't make room for strangers. But something about the way she stood there, alone, unafraid, clearly planning for survival, stuck with him longer than it should have. Over the next week, he saw her everywhere. At the church steps, not praying but listening. At the diner, eating slowly, saving half her meal. At the post office, waiting for letters that didn't come. And each time, she carried herself like someone who had already lost things and refused to lose more. The town noticed too. Women whispered. Men watched. Someone asked Eli what he thought of her. He said nothing. Silence had always been his safest answer. Maeve heard about him before she ever spoke to him. She heard that Eli Boone's wife had burned in a house fire. She heard the baby hadn't survived the winter after. She heard he never raised his voice, never smiled, never invited anyone inside. She heard he had refused 3 marriage offers in the last 2 years alone. And she heard the winter coming would be the worst in decades. Maeve listened. And she calculated. She wasn't looking for romance. Romance had failed her once already. What she needed was safety, land, and a man who understood that marriage could be more than love, it could be survival. She had no family left east of the river, no money to waste, and no intention of freezing to death because pride told her to wait for feelings. She watched Eli Boone work from a distance, noticed how he prepared early, stocked wood higher than his fence, repaired roofs before the first snowfall. He planned for winter like it was an enemy he respected. That was the kind of man she could trust. The day she finally spoke to him, the sky was already heavy with snow. Eli was loading supplies onto his wagon when she approached him, footsteps crunching steady, deliberate. He felt her presence before he turned. Years of solitude sharpened a man's instincts. He looked up, eyes unreadable. She didn't smile. She didn't hesitate. "You plan on surviving this winter alone?" she asked. It wasn't a flirtation. It wasn't soft. It was practical, almost blunt. Eli stared at her like he was deciding whether to speak at all. Finally, he said, "I always have." She nodded once, as if that answer confirmed something she already knew. "You don't have to," she said. That was when he looked at her properly. Really looked. Not at her face first, but at the way she stood, balanced against the wind, hands steady, eyes clear. "I'm not interested," he said. "I didn't ask what you were interested in," she replied calmly. "I asked what you were planning." That annoyed him more than it should have. "I don't take charity." "Neither do I," she said. "That's why I'm offering a partnership." He almost laughed. "Almost. You offering yourself to every man with a ranch?" She met his gaze without flinching. "Only the one who won't abandon me when the snow buries the road." Silence stretched between them, thick as the clouds overhead. Eli felt something uncomfortable stir in his chest, not desire, not hope, but recognition. This woman wasn't desperate. She was determined. And determination scared him more than loneliness ever had. "You want a wife?" she asked then, voice low but steady. "Or another winter alone?" The words hit harder than any plea could have. Because she wasn't asking for love. She was asking for truth. Eli Boone had buried love once. He had sworn never to dig it up again. But winter didn't care about vows made to the dead. Winter only cared about preparation. He looked past her, at the sky, at the land he knew too well. Another winter alone meant silence so deep it screamed. It meant injury with no one to fetch water. It meant death that no one noticed until spring. "Go back to town," he said finally. "This isn't your place." Maeve didn't move. "Neither was Dry Creek," she said quietly. "Until I chose it." Something shifted then, not in his heart, but in his certainty. And that was far more dangerous. As she turned to leave, he spoke before he could stop himself. "You know what you're asking?" She looked back. "Yes. And if I say no?" She smiled, not sweetly, but with resolve. "Then I find another way to survive. I always do." She walked away, leaving him with a question he hadn't allowed himself to ask in years. And as the first snowflakes began to fall, Eli Boone realized something terrifying. The cold outside wasn't what frightened him anymore. It was the thought of another winter with no one to speak his name. That if you're drawn to stories of resilience, quiet strength, and love born from survival, subscribe to the channel now, because the most powerful journeys don't begin with passion, they begin with choice.